On a cold Monday morning in Providence, the courtroom falls silent as Judge Frank Caprio takes his seat, and a woman who believes she is untouchable stares him down. Her name is Olivia Carter, wife of Police Captain Mark Carter, and she has walked into this room convinced that her husband's badge is stronger than any law, stronger than any judge. Across the aisle, Harold and Eleanor Brooks, an elderly couple still bruised and broken from a devastating crash, sit clutching each other's hands, waiting to see if justice still means anything. In a few minutes, Olivia will say the words that shake this courtroom to its core words, meant to intimidate a judge and bend justice to her will. But what she doesn't know is that someone in the back row is about to shatter her illusion of power forever. Before we go further, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now, and if stories where privilege collides with real justice matter to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next in Judge Caprio's courtroom. The story of how Olivia Carter ended up in Judge Caprio's courtroom begins 4 weeks earlier, on a damp autumn evening when Providence glowed under a misty haze. Downtown traffic shimmered across rain-soaked pavement, neon lights reflecting off puddles like broken pieces of a restless city. Inside the Mariner, an upscale wine bar known for its imported reds and exclusive membership list, Olivia held court at her usual corner table, surrounded by 3 friends who laughed at every exaggerated story she told. She wasn't just drinking, she was performing, glass after glass. She bragged about invitations to charity galas, her European vacations, the way restaurants always found a table for her, even without reservations. But nothing inflated her confidence more than the quiet phrase she repeated like a spell. "My husband is Captain Carter." The servers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them murmured privately, "She shouldn't be driving home." But when Olivia finally rose, wobbling slightly on her heels, and dropped her keys the first time, the valet stepped forward nervously. "Ma'am, I can call a taxi for you if you'd like." Olivia scoffed, snatching the keys. "I'm fine. I'm the wife of the police captain, sweetheart. Nobody's pulling me over." A laugh. Sharp, careless, the kind that comes only from people who believe consequences are for other people. She slid behind the wheel of her black Mercedes SUV, the engine growling to life. Music blasted as she pulled out, the bass vibrating through the quiet evening streets. But outside the cocoon of leather seats and expensive sound systems, Providence was peaceful. Sidewalks were lined with pumpkins. Porches flickered with orange lights, families preparing for fall festivals, school nights. Small joys Olivia Carter never noticed. Just a few miles away, Harold and Eleanor Brooks were leaving their grandson's 8th birthday party. They walked slowly to their modest Honda, Harold holding the door open for his wife, the way he had for 45 years. They talked about how Lucas's laughter reminded them of when their own children were small, how grateful they were to still be healthy enough to attend birthday parties, how lucky life had been lately. Eleanor kissed Harold on the cheek before he started the car. A simple, tender moment. Its warmth destined to collide with something cold and merciless. Olivia's SUV tore through the neighborhood at 45 miles per hour in a 25 zone. She fiddled with her phone, searching for a new song, her blurred vision missing the stop sign looming ahead. Her foot never even moved toward the brake. Harold had time only to gasp. Eleanor had time only to grip his arm. The collision exploded like thunder. Metal slammed into metal, the Honda spinning, whipping around, then smashing into a wooden utility pole that cracked under the force. Airbags deployed with violent speed. The world turned into white dust and muffled cries. Inside the mangled car, Harold felt fire shoot through his ribs. He tried to turn toward Eleanor, but pain crushed his chest. "Ellie, you okay?" Her voice was faint, trembling. "Harold, I can't my leg, something's wrong." Neighbors rushed outside. One man sprinted toward the crashed Honda, shouting for someone to call 911. Another yelled after a black SUV now idling 10 yards ahead. Its brake lights glowed red in the mist. For 15 seconds, Olivia Carter sat still, gripping the wheel. Her heartbeat pounded through her temples. She heard the cries. She saw the crushed sedan in her rearview mirror. She saw Harold slumped forward, Eleanor leaning sideways, both of them soaked in fear. Her breath hitched. She whispered once, "No." And then she hit the gas, hard. Tires screeched as she shot forward, disappearing into the neighborhood shadows, while strangers surrounded the destroyed Honda, trying desperately to help the elderly couple she abandoned. By the time paramedics arrived, Harold was barely conscious. Eleanor whispered, "Please, help him," before drifting into darkness. Back at the Carter residence, Olivia parked in the garage. Her hand shook as she closed the door behind her. For 5 minutes she stood alone in her silent kitchen, disheveled hair, smeared lipstick, chest heaving. Then she made her choice. She stripped off her blouse, changed into a sweatshirt, splashed water on her face, and sank into the living room recliner. When police knocked 20 minutes later, she stayed perfectly still, pretending to sleep. Officer Daniels, the first responder, recognized her immediately. "Mrs. Carter, we need you to step outside. Your vehicle matches the description of a hit-and run involving 2 injured civilians." Olivia blinked groggily, feigning confusion. "Hit and run. I've been home all night. Are you sure about this?" But the mangled front bumper visible through the cracked garage door told a very different story. And when the officer explained that the victims were elderly, seriously injured, Olivia didn't ask their names. She didn't ask if they were okay. She crossed her arms and said the words she always said when cornered. "Do you know who my husband is?" But her husband, Captain Mark Carter, wasn't home. He was across town responding to another case, completely unaware that the call coming across his radio, the one detailing a hit-and-run on Elmwood Avenue, was about to shatter his life. He listened carefully as dispatch listed the injuries: broken ribs, fractured hip, severe concussion, 2 seniors, 1 unconscious. Mark closed his eyes for a brief moment, sickened. He didn't know yet. It wasn't until Officer Daniels called the station and the lieutenant asked Mark to step into his office that the truth landed like a brick to the chest. "Mark, your wife's car was involved." He felt the world tilt, felt heat rise under his collar, felt something inside him crack open. But even then, before the shock subsided, before the pain truly set, in his training took over. "I'm pulling myself from anything related to this case immediately," he said. "I want full transparency. Handle her exactly like you would anyone else." There was no hesitation in his voice, only quiet devastation. Back at the Carter house, Olivia was being escorted to a patrol car. Flashing lights reflected off the polished exterior of her home. Neighbors peeked from windows. Olivia ducked her head, furious, not at what she had done, but at the humiliation. She had no idea her husband had already learned the truth. She had no idea he wasn't preparing to protect her. She had no idea this was only the beginning. And in 4 weeks, the choices she made tonight would collide with a moment in Judge Caprio's courtroom that would define her life forever. The morning after the crash, Captain Mark Carter sat alone in his office at the Providence Police Department. The blinds were half closed, letting in thin shards of gray light that sliced across the cluttered desk paperwork, reports. A framed photo of him and Olivia taken during better years, both laughing under fireworks on the 4th of July. That version of her felt like a stranger now. His phone buzzed non-stop messages from supervisors, fellow officers, even a few reporters who had caught wind of rumors. Mark didn't respond to any of them. Instead, he stared at the accident report lying open in front of him. The words blurred, reappeared, blurred again as he forced himself to keep reading. Hit and run, elderly victims, severe injuries. Driver fled scene, vehicle registered to Olivia Carter. He'd spent his entire career fighting for victims like Harold and Eleanor. Yet now he was married to the person who had caused this devastation. He rubbed his hands over his face, exhaustion settling deep into his bones. He remembered the first time he met Olivia at a charity gala. Bright lights, champagne, her hand slipping into his with ease. She had been charming, vibrant, confident. He never imagined that confidence would harden over the years, turning into entitlement, then something darker, belief in untouchability. A knock on his door broke through his thoughts. Lieutenant Harris stepped inside quietly. "Mark, Internal Affairs wants to know your involvement. They're checking if you had any contact with the responding officers." Mark closed the report. "Tell them I've removed myself entirely. I want no connection to this investigation beyond cooperating as a spouse of the accused." Harris nodded, hesitant. "You know everyone's talking. Some people think you'll try to help her." Mark's jaw clenched. "Then they don't know me at all." Harris placed a hand on his shoulder. "Just be ready. This is going to get messy." Messy didn't begin to cover it. Meanwhile, across town, Olivia sat at her gleaming marble kitchen island, scrolling through her phone as if browsing online sales rather than dealing with a felony. She wore silk pajamas and sipped a latte her housekeeper made before leaving early. Her attorney, Ethan Cole, arrived right on time. Sleek suit, polished shoes, the embodiment of expensive legal confidence. He placed his leather briefcase on the island and sighed. "Olivia, we need to talk about last night." She didn't look up. "I already told you. I was exhausted. I panicked. Panicking doesn't explain leaving the scene." She shrugged, annoyed. "Ethan, people panic all the time. That's why you're here. Fix it." "Fixing this," he said slowly, "isn't like getting a parking ticket waived." Olivia's expression chilled. "Well, it should be. My husband is the police captain. Surely that means something." Ethan removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You cannot, under any circumstances, bring up Mark's position. Not to the police, not to prosecutors, not to the judge. It will backfire." "Why?" she demanded. "It's helped before." He froze. "Before." Olivia paused too long enough for Ethan to understand. "Olivia, how many times have you used Mark's name to get out of something?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing major, just a few traffic stops. And a restaurant once when they didn't have our table ready." "Jesus," Ethan breathed. "What?" she snapped. "Because that's exactly the kind of behavior judges hate," she scoffed. "They don't hate it. They're intimidated by it." Ethan stared at her, as if seeing clearly for the first time the monster privilege had created. That afternoon, Mark returned home early. Olivia was pacing, angrily rehearsing talking points Ethan had given her. She spun toward Mark the moment he walked in. "Finally, I need you to talk to someone at the station or call the prosecutor. Whoever. This whole thing is being blown out of proportion." Mark dropped his keys on the counter and stared at her. 2 people were nearly killed. "Oh, please," she said, rolling her eyes. "They weren't killed. And I'm doing what I'm supposed to, working with an attorney, preparing my statements, handling it." "Handling it?" Mark's voice deepened. "By lying, by running, by pretending none of this is serious?" "I was scared," she said sharply. "Anyone would have run if they saw something that horrible." "No," Mark replied quietly. "Anyone decent would have stayed." The accusation sliced through the room. Olivia froze, her face tightening. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You looked them in the eyes, Olivia. You heard them screaming, and you drove away. They'll be fine," she muttered, turning away. "You don't know that." His voice cracked. "Harold Brooks can't lift his arms without crying out in pain. Eleanor needed emergency surgery. Do you understand what you did?" Silence. He continued, forcing each word out. "I visited them at the hospital." Olivia spun. "You what?" "I needed to. For myself. To see the damage. To look them in the eyes and say, I was sorry for what happened, even if you wouldn't." Olivia's mouth hardened. "That was stupid. Makes you look guilty by association." Mark stared at her in disbelief. "Guilty by association?" "Olivia, they're people. Human beings you almost killed." She folded her arms defensively. They should have been paying more attention. Mark was stunned. "You were drunk and speeding, and you blew a stop sign." She glared. You don't need to lecture me like I'm some rookie cop. Mark's shoulders sagged, years of disappointment crashing onto him all at once. You haven't asked about them. Not once. Not even today. I'm listening to my lawyer. Ethan said not to contact them. That's legal advice, Mark said, not moral guidance. I don't care, she snapped. I won't do anything that makes me look guilty. You are guilty, Mark whispered. You just don't feel it. Those words broke something between them, something that had already been fragile for years. Olivia's face twisted with anger. So what? You're choosing them over me now. Two strangers over your own wife. Mark took a slow breath. I'm choosing what's right. The room went still. Olivia stepped back, shaking her head. Unbelievable. You're supposed to protect me. I protect people from criminals, he said, not criminals from justice. She slapped him. Not hard, not impulsive, calculated, as if trying to jolt him back into line. Mark didn't move, didn't flinch, but something inside him shut off completely. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. I can't do this anymore. What's that supposed to mean? She demanded. It means, he said slowly, that if you continue down this path, if you keep pretending you're the victim here, you're going to walk into that courtroom alone. Olivia swallowed. You wouldn't. But Mark didn't answer. He simply walked past her, out the front door, letting it close gently behind him. Not slammed, not thrown, just final. Over the next 4 weeks, Olivia met with Ethan Cole repeatedly. He crafted narratives, mapped strategies, prepared her for every possible question. But he could never manufacture remorse. Meanwhile, Mark avoided her almost entirely. He slept at his brother's house. He visited the Brooks family 3 more times, sitting with Harold during physical therapy, listening to Eleanor describe her nightmares. He didn't do it as Captain Carter. He did it as a man trying to make amends for a woman he no longer recognized. He submitted a formal request to Internal Affairs, documenting every step he had taken to avoid influence. He filed confidential paperwork with a family court attorney. And he didn't tell Olivia. He couldn't bear one more argument, one more excuse, one more moment pretending their marriage wasn't built on foundations that had long since cracked. And through it all, Judge Frank Caprio reviewed case files, medical reports, and witness statements, quietly preparing for a hearing that would soon test the moral spine of every person involved. 4 weeks after the crash, the courthouse lights flickered on at dawn, and as the city woke, 3 lives moved toward an inevitable collision, one that would expose truth, shatter illusions, and redefine what justice meant inside those 4 walls. The courthouse was already buzzing by the time Olivia Carter's SUV rolled up to the entrance, driven not by her, but by a private chauffeur she'd hired for the day to maintain dignity. The irony was lost on her. She stepped out wearing a tailored navy coat, designer heels, and sunglasses far too large for the cloudy Providence morning. The world outside felt muted and cold, but Olivia carried herself as though she were arriving at a charity gala, not a criminal hearing that could determine her freedom. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was different, somber, tense, respectful. Families shuffled quietly in their seats. Lawyers reviewed notes. A few reporters lingered at the back, whispering. But everything stilled when Harold and Eleanor Brooks entered. Harold used a cane now. Each step sent a grimace across his face. Eleanor clung to his arm with her good hand, the other secured in a soft cast. Their daughter walked beside them, steady and protective. They sat carefully in the first row, the weight of pain evident in every movement. And yet, even injured, frightened, and still healing, they carried more dignity than Olivia would show the entire morning. Olivia didn't glance at them. She walked past without acknowledgement, her chin lifted high. Her attorney, Ethan Cole, rushed to keep up, carrying a stack of documents he'd reviewed a dozen times already. Remember, Ethan whispered urgently as they approached the defendant's table, stay respectful. No interruptions. You must show remorse. I look remorseful, Olivia muttered. That should be enough. You need to feel remorse, Ethan pressed. She shot him a glare. Feelings aren't on trial. Facts are. A bailiff announced the court was in session. Conversation stopped instantly. People rose as Judge Frank Caprio entered, calm, steady, carrying the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to be announced. "Good morning," he said, seating himself. "Let's proceed." His voice held warmth, but also a seriousness that set the tone. He picked up a file thick full far heavier than most. State of Rhode Island versus Olivia Carter. A soft ripple ran through the room. Ethan stood. "Your Honor, my client is present." Judge Caprio nodded, then looked directly at Olivia. "Mrs. Carter, please step forward." Her heels clicked sharply on the floor as she approached, her expression neutral, not nervous, not apologetic. If anything, she looked mildly inconvenienced. Judge Caprio reviewed the charges aloud, his voice echoing across the courtroom. Driving under the influence causing serious bodily injury, leaving the scene of an accident with injuries, reckless endangerment, failure to render aid. With each charge, Olivia's face remained unchanged, but the Brooks family visibly tightened. Eleanor dabbed tears from her eyes. Harold gripped his cane as if holding himself upright by force. Judge Caprio turned to Ethan. "Counsel, your statement." Ethan began with polished professionalism. "Your Honor, Mrs. Carter deeply regrets." But Olivia wasn't listening. She pulled out her phone. Right there, in court, in front of a judge. She glanced at the screen, scrolling with her thumb. Ethan saw and nearly choked on his sentence. "Olivia," he hissed under his breath, "put the phone away." She ignored him. Judge Caprio raised a brow. His silence alone was powerful enough to make half the courtroom lean forward. Ethan grabbed the phone, gently but firmly, placing it on the table. "As I was saying," Ethan continued, "she regrets the events of that night. She has no criminal record. She has served her community." Judge Caprio lifted a hand. "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Carter." Olivia looked up as though interrupted from something far more interesting. "Mrs. Carter," Caprio repeated, "do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" "Yes," she said quickly, brushing invisible lint from her coat. "Of course, Your Honor. It was an unfortunate incident. I'm very sorry it happened." Her tone carried no weight, no emotion, no recognition of the human suffering in the front row. Ethan swallowed hard. Caprio leaned slightly forward. "Do you remember leaving the scene of the crash?" Ethan opened his mouth, but Caprio stopped him. "I'm asking her." Olivia hesitated just long enough to reveal uncertainty, too panicked. "It was dark, and I was shaken up. Anyone would have reacted the same way." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Harold's daughter covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. Caprio's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "Mrs. Carter," he said quietly, "witnesses report your vehicle paused for approximately 15 seconds after the collision, long enough to see the damage, long enough to hear the cries." He paused, "long enough to make a choice." Olivia looked annoyed. It happened fast. Caprio's voice hardened by a degree. "After leaving the scene, you drove home, parked in your garage, changed your clothing, and pretended to be asleep when officers arrived. That does not appear to be panic, Mrs. Carter. That appears to be concealment." Olivia's composure faltered for a moment. "My attorney told me not to contact the victims." Caprio finished, flipping through the file. "Yes, I read that explanation." He lifted the victim impact statements, and his voice grew even more solemn. Mr. Brooks sustained multiple broken ribs and a damaged shoulder. Mrs. Brooks underwent emergency surgery for a shattered hip. Their grandchildren have been terrified to visit them because they cry whenever they see a car passing by. Eleanor began to sob quietly. Harold placed his trembling hand over hers. Olivia didn't turn around, not once, not even for a moment. Caprio continued, each sentence weightier than the last. Their medical expenses total over $180,000. Their vehicle was totaled. Their sense of safety is fractured. He lowered the papers. And you have not offered a single apology. Olivia stiffened. My lawyer said that with legal strategies, Caprio cut in gently, do not erase moral obligations. A long silence followed. Then, trying to regain control, Olivia straightened her spine. I'm prepared to compensate them financially. Caprio tilted his head. Mrs. Carter, do you believe money fixes this? She blinked, confused. Well, it helps, doesn't it? Caprio exhaled slowly, as though tired of disappointment. Ethan leaned close to Olivia, whispering frantically, Stop talking, please. But she wasn't listening. She was irritated, defensive, more concerned with her own image than the people she injured. Her arrogance radiated off her like heat. Judge Caprio turned fully toward her. Mrs. Carter, can you tell this court why you felt it unnecessary to reach out to the victims at any point over the last 4 weeks? Olivia looked directly at him, and for the first time since entering the room, the real Olivia surfaced. The one Ethan feared, the one Mark Carter had warned her about. She crossed her arms. Because I was advised not to make any statements that could be used against me. I'm following protocol. Caprio nodded slowly. I see. He tapped his pen lightly against the bench. Mrs. Carter, do you understand that remorse is not measured in legal terms, but in human ones? Olivia's jaw tightened. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. As a defendant, Caprio replied, but not as a human being. Her eyes flashed with irritation, a hint of the temper that had simmered beneath the surface for weeks. Then she made her first mistake. Your Honor, she said sharply, I believe you're being unfair. Caprio paused. Unfair? Yes, she snapped, heat rising in her voice. You're treating me like I'm some criminal off the street instead of someone who has contributed to this community. Someone with strong ties to law enforcement. Someone Ethan's head dropped into his hands. Judge Caprio watched her carefully. Go on, Mrs. Carter. She inhaled, choosing not caution, but pride. My husband is Captain Mark Carter, she said, fully stepping into the arrogance she'd always hidden behind money and appearances. He works with judges, prosecutors, police chiefs. I would think, she lifted her chin, I would think that would warrant a certain level of understanding. For the first time all morning, Judge Caprio's expression changed. Not anger, not surprise. Something colder. The entire courtroom froze, and Olivia, oblivious to the cliff she'd just stepped off, continued. I'm not saying you should dismiss everything, but treating me like some regular criminal isn't appropriate. It creates unnecessary problems for everyone. A gasp echoed from somewhere behind her. Ethan grabbed her elbow. Sit down. Now. But the damage was done. Judge Caprio leaned forward, hands folded, voice steady as steel. Mrs. Carter, are you suggesting that because of your husband's rank, this court should treat you differently? Olivia hesitated, not from fear, but from calculation. I'm saying it should be taken into account, she said. The room felt suddenly airless. Even Olivia felt it. She swallowed. Something had shifted. Something irreversible. And what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that someone sitting quietly in the last row had just risen to his feet. Her husband, Captain Mark Carter, a man who had heard every word, and everything she had used as a shield was about to crumble. For a moment, nobody in the courtroom moved. Nobody breathed. Olivia Carter stood rigid at the defendant's table, her words still hanging in the air like toxic smoke. Judge Caprio remained completely still, but the shift in his posture, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the faint narrowing of his eyes told every single person in that room that something irreversible had just occurred. He spoke slowly, deliberately. Mrs. Carter, I want you to clarify your statement for the record. Are you suggesting this court should consider your husband's rank when determining the outcome of your case? A murmur rolled through the room. People craned their necks, whispering under their breath. Ethan Cole, mortified, leaned into Olivia's ear and whispered harshly, Do not answer that. Keep quiet. But Olivia was past listening. The entitlement simmering beneath her veneer had fully surfaced now. She lifted her chin with a confidence that came not from innocence, but from decades of evading accountability. "What I'm saying," she replied, voice sharp and unyielding, "is that I should not be treated like someone off the streets. My husband's service, his position in this city, these things matter, and I expect a level of respect that reflects that." The courtroom collectively inhaled. Ethan let his head drop into his hands, and Judge Caprio, in the calmest voice imaginable, asked the question that would change everything. "Is Captain Carter present in the courtroom today?" Time froze. Olivia's confidence faltered. Her eyes darted around the room. She had no idea. She hadn't even asked if he planned to attend. She had assumed, not hoped, but assumed that he would either stay away to avoid embarrassment or step in quietly behind the scenes to protect her. She had never once considered he might be sitting somewhere she couldn't see, listening. The bailiff scanned the gallery. Then, from the final row, a man stood slowly, deliberately. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a simple gray button-up shirt tucked neatly into black slacks. No uniform, no badge, just a man who carried the weight of truth in the way he stood. Every eye in the courtroom turned. Harold and Eleanor watched with pained, quiet recognition. This was the man who had visited them, who apologized on behalf of the woman who never had. Olivia's heart dropped into her stomach. Captain Mark Carter stepped forward. "Your Honor," he said. His voice steady, though grief shadowed every word. "I'm Captain Mark Carter of the Providence Police Department." A ripple of shock, even from those who suspected. It suddenly became clear that his silence in the back row was not indifference. It was deliberate restraint. He had come not to interfere, but to witness. And now he was being called into the very storm Olivia had created. Judge Caprio studied him for a beat. "Captain, since your wife has invoked your name and position, the court will allow you to speak." Olivia snapped toward him, her composure cracking. Mark, don't. Please." Her voice trembled, not with remorse, but fear. He didn't look at her. He addressed only Judge Caprio. "Your Honor, I want to make something clear from the start," he said. "I did not authorize my wife to invoke my name. In fact, I explicitly told her not to. I told her weeks ago that I would not under any circumstances interfere with the investigation or the prosecution of this case." Olivia's lips parted in shock. "Mark." He held up a hand, still not looking at her. "I'm speaking." His tone wasn't angry. It was tired. The kind of tired that comes from years of watching someone you love drift further and further away until the person they become no longer resembles the one you married. "I have served this city for 22 years, Mark continued. "I have arrested drunk drivers. I have comforted victims. I have brought bad news to families. I have attended funerals for people taken by reckless choices behind the wheel." His voice cracked slightly. "I never thought I'd be standing here because of my own wife." Olivia's eyes welled, not with guilt, but panic. She could feel the room slipping away from her control. Mark continued, unwavering. "Your Honor, when I learned that my wife had fled the scene and left 2 innocent people suffering in the street, I was horrified. When I discovered she had tried to lie to police by pretending to be asleep, I was ashamed. And when she refused to take responsibility, refused even to ask about the victims, something inside me broke." Olivia whispered, "Mark, please don't do this." But he didn't stop. He turned finally, briefly, to face her. His eyes were red but resolute. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I told you weeks ago that if you kept going down this path, you would walk into that courtroom alone." He swallowed. "I meant it." Olivia shook her head violently. "You're abandoning me here?" In front of everyone. Mark looked back to Judge Caprio. "I'm not abandoning her. I'm doing what's right," he continued, voice steady. "I visited Mr. and Mrs. Brooks in the hospital, not as a police captain, not as a representative of anything official, but as a man whose spouse caused them immeasurable pain." He paused. "I looked them in the eyes and apologized for what she had done, for what she refused to do." Eleanor covered her mouth. tears streaming. Harold bowed his head, moved by the sincerity of a man who carried guilt that wasn't his. Olivia stared at him as though he had stabbed her. "Your Honor," Mark said, "I am here to support justice, not my wife." Even Ethan blinked in disbelief at the directness of the statement. And then he said the words that would be quoted in news stations across the country. "If you are questioning whether to impose the maximum sentence, please do. She nearly killed 2 people. She ran. She lied. And now she's trying to manipulate justice with my title. I will not, cannot be part of that." The courtroom erupted with shocked murmurs. Olivia covered her mouth, whispering, "Stop, please stop." Mark pressed on, voice breaking. "I have filed for divorce, Your Honor. Not out of anger, but because I no longer recognize the woman standing before you. The woman I married believed in kindness. The woman I married cared about others. But this woman, she uses my badge like a weapon." Olivia's legs shook. She collapsed into her chair as though her spine had suddenly given out. Mark stepped back, tears gathering at the edges of his eyes. "I'm done shielding her from consequences," he said quietly. "It's time she faces them." Judge Caprio nodded, his expression softening, not out of pity but out of respect. "Thank you, Captain Carter. Your integrity does this court, and your city, great honor." Mark bowed his head and walked back toward the rear of the courtroom. As he passed Olivia, she reached out desperate, trembling, to grab his arm. He gently pulled away. For the first time in her adult life, the person she relied on to clean up her messes walked past her without turning back. Harold and Eleanor watched him go with quiet reverence. The courtroom door closed behind him. And Olivia Carter, now truly alone, was finally forced to confront the truth she had spent her life running from. Her husband's badge couldn't save her. Her money couldn't shield her. Her arrogance had destroyed the last person who still believed she could change. Judge Caprio took a slow breath, his gaze returning to Olivia now, pale, shaking, and stripped of the illusion of invincibility. "Mrs. Carter," he said, voice steady as granite, "let us proceed." A stillness settled over the courtroom, so profound it felt almost unnatural. Even the soft hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to quiet down, as if the building itself sensed this moment demanded reverence. Olivia Carter sat frozen in her chair, her face pale, her breath unsteady, her composure shattered so completely that she almost looked like a different person entirely. For the first time since stepping into the courtroom, she was no longer playing a role, no longer hiding behind a polished veneer. She looked exposed, stripped of the entitlement she had worn like armor her whole life. But the moment for sympathy had passed, and Judge Frank Caprio knew it. He took a slow breath, shifted slightly forward, and rested his hands on the bench. "Mrs. Carter," he began, "you have invoked your husband's name. You implied that his position should influence this court. You suggested that standard justice should not apply to you." Olivia swallowed hard, staring down at her trembling hands. Caprio continued, voice measured and steady. "What you do not seem to understand is that justice does not bend for power. It is not a tool for the privileged, and it is certainly not something you manipulate by threatening this bench." A murmur traveled across the audience. Every person in the room leaned closer, sensing that the emotional storm was only beginning. But Olivia, still reeling from Mark's departure, reacted the way frightened people often do. She lashed out. "You're twisting my words," she blurted through clenched teeth. "I never threatened you." Judge Caprio raised a brow. "No? I simply meant," she continued, voice rising, "that insulting my husband's service by treating me like some criminal Ethan Cole practically jumped out of his chair." "Olivia, stop." Too late. Her anger, unfiltered and raw, poured out in a way she couldn't control. "I'm not some nobody you can make an example out of." "My husband is not responsible," Caprio interrupted sharply, "for your actions." His voice cut through the air like a blade. Olivia flinched. The entire courtroom fell silent. Judge Caprio pressed on. You are here because of what you did, not because of who you married. For a moment, the weight of his words seemed to crush the last remnants of her resistance. But her pride was not ready to die quietly. She gripped the defense table with white knuckles and leaned forward. You don't understand, she hissed, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and fury. You don't know what it's like to be in the public eye, expected to be perfect, judged for everything I do. Judge Caprio's tone hardened. Mrs. Carter, the Brooks family did not ask to be in the public eye when you hit them. They did not ask for their lives to be upended. They did not ask for pain, fear, or trauma, but you brought it to their doorstep without a second thought. Olivia's jaw tightened. She tried to hold her ground, but her voice faltered. You're making it sound worse than it was. Worse, Caprio repeated quietly. Mrs. Brooks nearly died. Eleanor let out a quiet sob. Harold wrapped his arm protectively around her shoulders. For a fleeting second, Olivia looked back just briefly enough to catch sight of Eleanor's casted wrist, her trembling lips, the bruises still yellowing along her cheek. The guilt hit like a punch to the gut sharp, intrusive. It flickered across Olivia's face just long enough for the courtroom to see it. But guilt was unfamiliar territory for her. She didn't know how to sit with it. So she recoiled from it, deflecting in the only way she knew. It was an accident, she snapped, defensive and desperate. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. No one said you meant to, Caprio responded calmly. Accidents happen. But fleeing the scene, that was deliberate. That was a choice. Olivia opened her mouth to retort, but the judge continued before she could speak. You paused your car, Mrs. Carter. You looked into the rearview mirror. You saw the destruction. You heard their screams, and you drove away. His voice thundered, not loud, but powerful enough to shake something inside everyone present. You did not panic, he said. You chose self-preservation over human decency. Olivia's eyes brimmed with tears, not remorseful ones, but terrified, frantic ones. I was scared, she whispered weakly. So were they, Caprio replied. Those 3 words hit her harder than anything Mark had said, harder than anything the prosecutor could have said. The courtroom fell silent again. Judge Caprio leaned back in his seat, studying Olivia carefully. Mrs. Carter, do you know why your husband asked this court to impose the maximum sentence? Olivia remained silent, eyes wide, chest heaving. Because he still believes in what justice means, Caprio continued, even when it costs him everything. Her lip trembled. He's punishing me. He's honoring the badge, Caprio corrected. Something you have used as a shield for far too long. She looked down, shoulders collapsing inward. For the first time, she looked truly small, but the moment of vulnerability did not last. Suddenly, unexpectedly, she stood. Her voice broke as she shouted, He doesn't understand what I've gone through. None of you do. I have lived my entire life under expectations, scrutiny, people waiting for me to fail. Her hands shook violently as she pointed toward Harold and Eleanor. And now you all want to ruin my life over one mistake. Gasps erupted across the courtroom. Even Ethan stepped backward from her, as though distancing himself physically could save him professionally. Olivia pressed on, her voice unhinged, cracking at the seams. I've done so much good. I've contributed to this city. I've endured the pressure of being married to a man in law enforcemental, ways putting the community first, never me. And I'm the villain because I had a bad night. Her outburst crescendoed, raw and chaotic. I'm being destroyed for one moment of weakness while no one cares what I've endured for years. The courtroom exploded in noise whispers, disgusted murmurs, gasps. Judge Caprio raised a hand. The room fell silent instantly. Mrs. Carter, he said quietly, please sit down. She hesitated, then slowly, reluctantly, sank into her chair. Caprio waited until the room settled completely before speaking again. Let me explain something, he began, voice gentle yet unwavering. There's nothing this court can do to you today that compares to what you have already done to yourself. Olivia blinked, tears spilling silently. You lost your husband's respect, Caprio continued. You lost your integrity. You lost the illusion that you are above the consequences of your own actions. He paused, letting the weight of those words settle. Punishment does not destroy character, Mrs. Carter, he said softly. It reveals it. Olivia stared at him, breaking apart inch by inch. And today, Caprio concluded, your character is on full display. She looked down, quietly sobbing now, not the dramatic, angry tears from before, but deep, painful ones that came from realizing something she had avoided her whole life. This was not a world she could bend. This was not a judge she could intimidate. This was not a courtroom she could manipulate. And this time, there was no one left to hide behind. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Mrs. Carter, he said, it is time for this court to determine your sentence. The room held its breath. Across the aisle, Harold and Eleanor held each other's hands. At the back of the courtroom, the door where Mark had exited remained shut, a quiet reminder of everything Olivia had already lost. And at the bench, Judge Frank Caprio prepared to deliver one of the most consequential decisions of his career. Judge Frank Caprio allowed a long silence to stretch across the courtroom. Silence weighted with consequence, with truth, with the kind of gravity that presses down on everyone present. Olivia Carter sat trembling, her breath hitching in uneven bursts. Her once impeccable posture had collapsed. Her shoulders drooped inward, as if the world were closing around her. But, before the judge delivered his sentence, he did something unexpected. He looked toward the Brooks family, Harold and Eleanor sitting quietly at the front. Their bodies were frail, their eyes heavy with weeks of pain and sleepless nights. Eleanor leaned on Harold's shoulder, her casted wrist trembling slightly. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks, Caprio said gently, is there anything you wish this court to know before sentencing? Eleanor looked up, startled by the invitation. Harold squeezed her hand. She nodded once, gathered her strength, and pushed herself slowly to her feet. The room held its breath. Even Olivia lifted her eyes. Her voice was soft, fragile, but steady. Your Honor, Eleanor began, my husband and I were not people who hate. We don't want anyone's life destroyed. We never have. Harold nodded beside her. But what she did, Eleanor's voice faltered as she glanced at Olivia, who quickly looked away. What she did didn't just break our bones. It broke our sense of safety. It broke our trust. It changed everything. She inhaled shakily. I hear Mrs. Carter say she's lived under pressure, that she's been judged, expected to be perfect. But Your Honor, at our age, we were just grateful to be alive. We were coming home from our grandson's birthday. We never expected that someone would hit us and leave us in the road. She wiped tears with the edge of her sleeve. We would have forgiven the accident itself, truly, but she left us there. Her voice cracked. She left us. Harold, voice rough, added softly, we thought we were going to die, Judge. A sob broke from somewhere in the back row. Eleanor bowed her head. Whatever Your Honor decides, we'll accept it. We just want her to understand what she stole from us. They sat again, holding each other tightly. Judge Caprio nodded with profound respect. Thank you, Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Brooks. Then he turned back to Olivia, who looked utterly crushed, her lips trembling, her eyes glassy with tears that finally held something genuine. But it wasn't enough. A soft knock at the back door interrupted the moment. The bailiff approached the judge, whispered something quietly, and handed him a small folder. Caprio listened, nodded once, and the bailiff stepped aside. Caprio tapped the folder lightly. Mrs. Carter, this contains documentation that was just added to the case file. Olivia blinked in confusion. What? What documentation? Caprio opened it. Records of prior traffic stops over the past several years where officers noted you identified yourself as the wife of Captain Carter to avoid citations. Not once, not twice, but 7 separate incidents. The courtroom erupted gasps, murmurs, shock. Ethan Cole went pale. Olivia's mouth fell open. That's not. Those were misunderstandings, Mrs. Carter, Caprio cut in. Each report states that you used your husband's position to request favorable treatment. A reporter scribbled furiously. Someone whispered, 7 times. My God, Caprio continued, unflinching. This demonstrates a pattern, not a single lapse of judgment, but repeated misuse of your husband's role in law enforcement. Olivia stammered. Those officers exaggerated enough. Caprio's voice wasn't loud, but it silenced the room instantly. Your pattern of behavior shows entitlement, lack of accountability, and disregard for the law you believe should protect you. She shook her head in panic. No, that's not who I am. Then who are you, Mrs. Carter? Caprio asked firmly. He let the question hang, heavy and unanswerable. She had no reply. The judge took a deep breath. Before I deliver my sentence, there's one more matter to address. He looked at the bailiff. Bring him in. The door at the back opened again. Captain Mark Carter stepped inside. Olivia gasped, first in shock, then in dread. Ethan whispered, "Oh no." Mark walked down the aisle, slowly, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat, but he did not take a seat. Instead, he stopped in the center of the courtroom and turned toward Judge Caprio. Your Honor, I apologize for returning, but I forgot to say something earlier. Olivia's voice broke. Mark, please don't. He still didn't look at her. I need the court to know, he said, voice steady but heavy, that I love my city. I love my job. I love what the badge stands for, and I will not allow my name or my profession to be used to corrupt justice. He finally faced Olivia. She froze. I stood by you for years, he whispered. Years of excuses, years of complaints, years of watching you forget who you used to be. His throat tightened. I begged you to stop using my position to get your way, but you wouldn't. Tears streamed down Olivia's face. Mark looked away. I hoped, I prayed, that this accident would open your eyes, that you would show remorse. But today, in this courtroom, you proved me wrong. He turned to Judge Caprio again. I support whatever sentence you choose. Fully. Then he stepped back, bowed his head, and quietly returned to the exit. Olivia reached out a shaking hand. Mark didn't go, Mark. But he walked out without looking back. The door clicked shut softly. That sound broke Olivia more than anything else. She collapsed into her seat, sobbing uncontrollably, raw, broken, desperate. Even the members of the courtroom who despised her arrogance felt the weight of that moment. Judge Caprio let her sob, let everyone feel the consequences she had created. Then, after nearly a full minute, he spoke. Mrs. Carter, please stand. Her legs quivered as she forced herself upright. Caprio's tone was solemn, firm, but compassionate. Olivia Carter, he began. You came into this courtroom today believing you could manipulate justice through power, through status, through intimidation. She shook her head, but he continued. You invoked the badge of a man who has spent his entire career protecting this community with honor. You attempted to twist his service into a shield for your wrongdoing. Her tears spilled down her cheeks. You left 2 innocent people in the street bleeding, terrified, believing they might die. Eleanor sobbed quietly. Harold wiped her tears. And even today, Caprio added, you made excuses for your behavior rather than taking responsibility for the suffering you caused. Olivia's breath shook. Her lips moved, but no words came out. However, Caprio said, softening ever so slightly, this court believes people can change when confronted with truth. He paused. But change does not come without consequences. He lifted the sentencing document, and the courtroom braced itself. Mrs. Carter, he said, I am now ready to render judgment. Olivia squeezed her eyes shut. Everyone leaned forward. This was the moment, the one that would define everything that came next. The courtroom fell into a silence so profound it felt like the world had tilted, as if every soul inside those 4 walls were suspended in breath, waiting. Olivia Carter stood trembling before. The bench mascara smudged, cheeks wet. Her once impeccable composure shattered into dust. She looked less like the woman who swaggered into the courtroom earlier, and more like someone who had finally realized just how fragile her life really was. Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses, glanced at the papers before him, and then looked directly into Olivia's eyes, not with anger, not with cruelty, but with a depth of moral gravity that left the entire room hanging on his next words. "Mrs. Carter," he began, voice steady and resonant, "I have weighed not only the facts of your case, but the pattern of behavior that brought you here. You have repeatedly used your husband's position to evade accountability. You left two innocent people suffering in the street, and you attempted to manipulate this court by invoking your husband's rank." Olivia swallowed hard. Her knees shook so violently that Ethan Cole placed a steadying hand on her arm knot in support, but to prevent her from collapsing. "But I have also taken into account," Caprio continued, "that people are not beyond redemption. Accountability is often the first step toward genuine transformation." He leaned forward. "Today, you will take that step." The room held its breath. Olivia's eyes squeezed shut. For the charge of driving under the influence causing serious bodily injury, Caprio said, "You are fined the statutory maximum of $5,000, and your driver's license is suspended for 1 year." A ripple of whispers spread through the gallery. Olivia's lips parted, relief mixed with dread. "For leaving the scene of an accident involving injury," Caprio continued, "you are sentenced to 60 days in jail, to be served on consecutive weekends over the next 6 months. You will report every Friday at 7 p.m. and be released every Monday at 7 a.m. Olivia choked on her breath. Her hand flew to her mouth. Ethan whispered, "Stay calm. It could have been worse." But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. "For your attempt to influence this court by referencing your husband's law enforcement rank, I am sentencing you to 300 hours of community service, not general service, not desk work. You will fulfill these hours at the Providence Trauma Center, specifically working with victims of traffic collisions and their families." A collective murmur swept through the crowd. The Brooks family looked at each other, eyes brimming with complicated emotions, pain, gratitude, and something quieter, closure. Caprio's voice remained firm. "You will not merely sweep floors or hand out pamphlets. You will spend time listening to victims, helping them, sitting beside those whose lives were changed by reckless driving." Tears streamed down Olivia's face. "You will also undergo mandatory alcohol counseling for 1 year," Caprio continued, "and submit to random alcohol testing to ensure compliance." Her shoulders sagged, as if the weight of everything she'd been avoiding had finally come crashing down on her. "And lastly," Caprio said, lowering his voice, "you will write personal letters of apology to Mr. and Mrs. Brooks. These letters will be reviewed by the court. If the Brooks wish to meet with you, you will make yourself available." Eleanor Brooks quietly pressed a hand to her heart. "The total of your penalties," Caprio concluded, "reflects not just punishment, but an opportunity for you to rebuild your character, should you choose to take it." Olivia's sobs broke through the silence. They weren't the defiant, angry tears of earlier. They were deeper, messier. The tears of someone no longer able to hide from the truth. Ethan gently guided her into her seat, whispering, "It's over. It's over." But it wasn't over. Not really. Judge Caprio wasn't done. "Mrs. Carter," he said softly, "your greatest punishment today is not the fines, nor the jail time, nor the service." Olivia looked up, eyes red, trembling. "It is the reality that your husband, once your greatest defender, chose integrity over protecting you. He chose justice. He chose truth." Olivia clutched the edge of the table, her breath shallow. "And I hope," Caprio continued, "that one day, instead of resenting him for it, you will understand the courage it took for him to do so." A deep, painful sob escaped her. The judge nodded once to the bailiff. "Mrs. Carter will be remanded for processing." The bailiff approached, touching her arm gently. "Ma'am." Olivia jolted as if waking from a nightmare. She stared at the bailiff, then at the courtroom, then toward the back door where Mark had exited moments earlier. But he was gone. His absence felt like a shadow pressing down on her chest. She followed the bailiff out, collapsing inward with every step. No reporters shouted. No one jeered. The room was silent. As Olivia disappeared from view, Judge Caprio took a moment, just a moment, to breathe. Then he looked toward Harold and Eleanor Brooks. "I know," he said softly, "that today cannot undo what happened to you, but I hope it brings some measure of healing." Harold gave a grateful nod. Eleanor whispered something too soft to hear. The courtroom slowly emptied. Reporters hurried out to broadcast what would soon become national headlines. Police captain's wife sentenced after attempting to influence Judge Caprio. Harsh sentence demonstrates no one is above the law. Captain Carter praised for choosing justice over family loyalty. But the story didn't end there. Months passed. Olivia served her week in jail time without incident. But it was the community service that changed her. At the trauma center, she held the hands of people who had been pulled from crumpled vehicles. She listened to mothers describe the panic of receiving late-night hospital calls. She watched accident victims struggle to relearn how to walk, how to lift their arms, how to return to normal life. And one afternoon, 6 months into her service, she encountered Eleanor Brooks in the waiting room. Eleanor had come for a physical therapy appointment. Olivia froze. Eleanor looked older somehow, thinner, but stronger too. She stared for a long moment, then nodded. "I read your letters," she said gently. "I can see you're trying." Olivia burst into tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for everything. For leaving you. For hurting you. For the person I was." Eleanor nodded again. "I don't know if I can forgive you fully yet. But I believe you're becoming someone who deserves forgiveness one day." Those words broke something open, something healing. A year after sentencing, a local news station interviewed Judge Caprio about the case. He stood on the courthouse steps, the wind tugging at his robe. "Some people," he said softly, "must lose everything before they can discover who they truly are." Olivia Carter lost her privilege, her shield, her marriage. But she gained something far more valuable: accountability, humility, a second chance to become the person she had forgotten she could be. And just like that, justice had done what justice was meant to do. Real justice doesn't just punish, it transforms. Olivia Carter believed power could protect her from consequences, but in the end, it was truth, integrity, and courage that shaped her fate. The bravery of Captain Mark Carter, choosing what was right over what was comfortable, reminds us that real loyalty is loyalty to principles, not excuses. And the strength of Harold and Eleanor Brooks shows how deeply our actions can ripple into the lives of others. In our own lives, we're often tempted to protect those we love from hard truths, but sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to let someone run from accountability, because growth begins where excuses end. If this story moved you, comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful real-life courtroom stories like this one.